This week, we are marking the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. It's an important opportunity for all to reflect on the truth of Canada's history and the ongoing intergenerational trauma caused by Indian residential school. We must acknowledge that our history together as First Nations people and settlers has not always been good, and we still feel this shadow. We cannot have reconciliation without truth.
The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is one of reflection, a day to reflect on the scars left by Indian residential schools on Indigenous people and the ongoing intergenerational trauma that still exists today. Till this date, Indigenous peoples are living with the trauma of colonization, of all the violence, hurt, and abuse they were subjected to in residential schools and beyond. We know that rates of homelessness, mental illness and addictions, suicide, incarceration are higher among Indigenous peoples. And this means we are failing Indigenous communities who deserve much, much better from the government. First Nations deserve clean water, for starters, but also proper access to healthcare and affordable housing. And they deserve a meaningful commitment from all levels of government that their pain and hurt is seen, and all efforts are being made to stop intergenerational trauma in its tracks. And right now, we have a government that is refusing to commit to respectful, meaningful, nation-to-nation relationships with First Nations. They're taking a colonial divide and conquer approach, and that cannot stand. Until and unless Ontario and Canada right their wrongs to Indigenous people, we have not won and we have not progressed. On this day of reflection, I'll be spending my time learning about this province and country's painful history of colonialism and oppression of First Nations, and I invite you to do the same.
If reconciliation makes you feel good, you're probably doing it wrong. It should make you a little bit uncomfortable. Reconciliation is more than wearing an orange shirt, and it's more than raising a flag or getting a day off. We are still searching for our loved ones who never came home from Indian residential schools. Over 10,000 suspected remains of children have been discovered in these places, all over Turtle Island. Yet still, people deny it is true. They deny that residential schools were horrible places. These deniers have websites and post on social media what has become an unacceptable form of hate, denying the truth of Indian residential schools. This must end. We must continue to advocate for mandatory education about Indian residential schools for all students and better education about the treaties. Reconciliation cannot be an act of performance. It has to come from reflecting on the past, healing, and making things right. We all have a role. Miigwech.